they will. But yeah, awesome. Thank you all for being here today for this panel. My name is Aparna. I am a member of the ANC 1A Housing Justice and Zoning Committee, and I'm also a tenant organizer with Stomp, Slumlords. And part of the reason I'm really excited that we're doing this panel on empowering renters and tenant organizing is, we're here at this fair that has a lot of great resources, a lot of great programs that are available to tenants. But at the same time, we are in the middle of a housing crisis. It's only getting more expensive for folks to stay in their homes. A lot of buildings aren't being maintained, aren't being repaired. And we just went through a budget cycle where we've seen even more cuts to vital services like emergency rental assistance and the housing preservation fund, reduction trust fund. Yeah, so many words. But that basically means, there's even less money from the city for tenants to be able to stay in their homes or to be able to make necessary repairs like fixing flooding or mold or rodent issues, or to be able to maintain their home for years to come and be able to age in place. And so it's more important than ever in these times when the city isn't investing in the people and isn't taking care of our rights, that we have to come together as tenants. We have to make sure that these tools that exist work for us, and we have to fight for new tools that can really make sure that all of us can be housed and be able to stay in our homes. And so I'm really excited to have a few folks who have been, doing a lot of tenant organizing across the city, both in their homes and building relationships with folks in other buildings as well. So we have Damiana Dendy, who is a housing organizer with Jobs with Justice. We have Niky Carlson, who is a tenant organizer who lives at Park Place Apartments. And then we have Roger Williams, who is a tenant organizer as well, living at Tivoli Gardens.
Does anybody need a Spanish interpretation? Okay, thank you. Sorry for
No, thank you. And so yeah, I think just to get started, would love to hear from each of you, just sort of, how you first got involved with tenant organizing. Like, what was that first decision that put you into it, and either at your own buildings or just in general, if your organizing started with other buildings. So I'll start with Damiana.
Hello, how's everybody doing?
Well,
okay, good. Yeah, so I started, I have to start actually when I was a kid because my mom is a tenants attorney at a union. And so very early on I was like, wow, landlords are very greedy and terrible.
Yeah.
So just all the horror stories, But when I came to DC, I was living in a house where it was just terrible conditions. I seriously thought I was gonna die in the bathroom because the floor was at like a 45-degree angle, and I was terrified. Every time I took a shower, I was like, am I gonna fall to the floor? And in order to cook, I had to boil water and pour it all over my counters because there was just like too many insects and ants and stuff. So just to cook, and like, I'm not the type of person to eat out a lot, so I was like, okay. But my landlord did not want to do anything about that, and so, being the person that I am, and having the mother that I had, I was like, always fight for yourself, I decided to go on rent strike by myself. And I didn't at that time get anyone else in my house to go on rent strike with me, which is how I learned really quickly I need to get other people to join me and we need to take collective action, because I did win my court case, but it didn't mean anything for the house. The house remained in terrible condition, and eventually I just self-evicted, because it was just bad conditions. So that's how I started, and then I have been organizing with Stomp by Slumlords for a few years, and now I'm at DC Jobs with Justice as a tenant organizer.
So I
never really thought about tenant organizing. Like, it's just not something that occurred to me as something that I could do or should do, until my neighbor knocked on my door. And I live in a very big building. There's about 161 units. And so organizing a building that big is kind of a lift. And I'm so happy that my neighbor did knock on my door. And their main issue was like they were upset about paying cat rent because their cat doesn't hurt anything. Why are you paying $50, $75, whatever it was at the time? And he's like, if I have a complaint, I bet other people do too. And he invited me and my husband to a protest. My husband said, yes, of course, we'll go. And I liked all the things that I was hearing. I very much liked the neighbor. I don't have a cat. I do have a dog. I do still pay dog rent. But we had a one-on-one. He explained, how it could be beneficial to talk to our neighbors, figure out what the other issues are. And even though I personally didn't have any real complaints about my building, my dad was an auto worker. I've always been very pro-union. It all sounded like a great idea. I had the time and the capacity. I like meeting people. I like talking to people. And as we knocked on doors, there were some real significant issues, and there were some things that we needed to bring to management to address. And one voice, as loud as you want to be, is not going to be as loud as 10 voices, 20 voices, 30 voices. And shortly after we did start organizing in the building, and we got like a good core group, probably 10 organizers, our building went up for sale. So it initiated the TOPA process, and luckily we had already started organizing, so we were able to formalize our tenants association fairly quickly, and that was back in 2020. And having gone through the TOPA process, that did help us, I guess, have a stronger tenants association, because everybody did have a shared goal initially to kick that off, and we took it very seriously. A bunch of the tenants donated money to get a feasibility study done to see if we could buy the building. We interviewed probably 8 to 10 different lawyers, and we were lucky that we went through TOPA during COVID, because they did keep extending our timeline. But because we knew what the problems were already, we were able to be prepared to go to the new prospective buyer and be like, well, what are you going to do to fix these? And we got a lot of really great concessions from that. I'm sure I can probably cover that in another question later on. But yeah, it's not something I ever thought about. I'm really glad my neighbor knocked on my door. I was on the board for a couple of years after that, and I highly encourage anyone who thinks that you can't do it, or even if you don't have a problem with your unit or your building, that doesn't mean that there aren't problems to fix. That doesn't mean that you can't help somebody else. So if you have the capacity, please just start talking to your neighbors.
Roger, really quickly before you go, I'll just also add for folks who may not know, the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase, or TOPA is the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. Basically, if you live in a multifamily home and or apartment building, and the building goes up for sale, the owner puts it up for sale, the tenants have the right to either try to collectively buy the building together and form a co-op, or as Niky was explaining, they also have the option to use that leverage to negotiate with new buyers on different conditions fixes or things that they want to see in the building moving forward. Awesome. All right, Roger, do you want to talk a little bit about how you first started getting involved in tenant organizing?
Okay, hello. I guess where I should start. Tivoli Gardens is in Ward 1, the top of Ward 1. Our council member is Brianne Nadeau. Our twin buildings, and there are 225 units between the two, were being organized back in 2019, which was just before the pandemic. We weren't getting a lot of traction. When the pandemic came along, we got traction, and a rent strike was mounted. We had people that lost their jobs. Those who didn't, a number of them had their hours cut back. And that was the impetus joining the rent strike. Then we had other folks like myself who joined in sympathy, and our money was stashed, kept in a escrow fund. Then there was a period after the moratorium that the government mandated where landlords could not go to court and evict people. After that period, where our tenants association went into a doldrum, it wasn't until 2023 and that a group of 4 of us began to organize, and by October, the latter part of October of last year, we had our first general meeting, which we had a good turnout. We ended up presenting a demand letter to management. Our management happens to be Ross Management. They're based in Maryland. Their headquarters is Bethesda, Maryland. The owners are actually Cape's Foundation. We have had problems with getting management to address some of our core issues. We had a second general membership meeting in April of this year, which was again well attended. We had 60-some people show up. The last meeting, which was the last week in June, we changed the format around. It wasn't the format that was a problem. I think some of the people, a number of people that have been engaged have become jaded because we've run into stonewalling from management. And the issue, as I see it, is how to get more folks aware that they have to be in it for the long haul, and that TOFA is key to the forces that are a tool that's being used against us, and that the city council and the mayor, not all the city council, is bent on reducing the coverage of TOFA. And that if the residents, tenants, aren't collectively involved, that they're going to be pushed in stages to a wall, and they won't have a place in the city. And so that's a challenge. And I guess we'll leave it there.
Thanks, Roger. And that actually I think is a great segue into a lot of times in tenant organizing, we do face challenges, whether it's working through fear of a tenant going on rent strike, or a tenant who's afraid to go on rent strike, say, or facing intimidation from landlords, or even just apathy. And so I guess my next question is has there been a time where you all have faced a significant challenge in your organizing, and how have you gotten through it, or just in general, how do you try to get through some of those challenges that you face? Whoever wants to go first can go ahead.
Okay, well, I guess I turn this on. Okay. Okay, I think one of the biggest challenges that's consistent throughout just any building you're trying to organize is that people have to recognize that they need to knock on other people's doors, or seriously have one-on-one conversations with their neighbors. And it's really hard to convince people to do that. And I think, like right now I'm organizing at St. Elizabeth's, which is just newly renovated, as some people might know. It opened in 2019, but there's a lot of issues there. It's crazy. And it's a huge building. There's 252 units. And almost everyone has a problem. Basically, 100% of the tenants. But people don't really know each other in the building, and it's hard to, have a one-on-one conversation. They're really fired up, really ready to take action, but then they feel like, oh, well, nobody else probably has this issue. And I'm like, no, come with me. Let's knock on your neighbor's door. Like, trust me. And then once they start doing it, they're like, oh my gosh, everybody has crazy issues here. Like, it's really that first hurdle. I feel like getting, starting to build a community is really what it is, and starting to meet your neighbors is really hard. And past that, I think, of course, paying rent is our financial, way of having leverage over our homes. And therefore, going on rent strike is how we can take that power, and turn it on its head, actually have collective action. So the hardest part with going on rent strike, I think, which is the strongest thing to do, to take as a group of tenants, is what Aparna was talking about, which was just fear, because nobody wants to feel like they're not going to have housing because they're not paying their rent. But we do have the strongest tenant protections in DC in the entire country, which is crazy. Like, we can legally go on rent strike, which is amazing. And I tell everybody that because seriously, it's so amazing. And, but despite that, people are still nervous to do it. I mean, even for me, like, I've been on rent strike 3 times, and that's scary every single time. So, really understanding what fear looks like it can look like, okay, I'm just scared to not pay my rent. Can you explain why I have this right in DC? Or it can look like, oh, I don't think I'm gonna not pay my rent this month because I need to, go on vacation, and just like some other reason, and then just realizing, okay, it actually is really anxiety inducing to not pay your rent or your housing, and this is why we're gonna do it as a collective and not as an individual, like I did stupidly many years ago. And this is why we're gonna have power, and we're going to win if we all get on board and do this. And recognizing that the more people that you have on rent strike, the better, and that also, just going public at a time where there's enough people on board, and it really it can be like 5 people. If you're making a big stink about it, you can be successful. So,
5 people.
Cohesion.
Niky, before you go, I'll also just add to the rent striking point. I just want to emphasize what Damiana said, that the ability to withhold rent is a legal right in DC. So if you feel like you don't have livable conditions, that is your right. And also to underline, to Damiana's point, that's your individual right, but it is much more powerful if you have a group together with you. And the main thing, we also have some information at the DSA table if you're interested in learning more after this panel. The main thing is to just hold the money elsewhere. So that when you do go through court and kind of prove your case that you've tried to get all of these fixes and they haven't happened, that if you do need to pay some back rent, then you still have it somewhere to do so. So just want to emphasize, rent striking is one of the most powerful tools, and just want to underline the point that as Damiana was saying, that it is legal. So, yes.
Alright, so as far as the biggest challenges that I think our building, our organizing committee, our tenants association board has faced, it really is kind of what you said. It's scary to knock on people's doors. You don't know if they're going to be happy to see you. Sometimes they're not.
True.
But that is the most necessary thing with organizing, is knock on those doors and then follow up. Because if you knock on my door, I tell you my problem, and then I don't hear from you, I don't see you, I'm gonna feel like you kind of wasted my time. You have to actually build those relationships. You have to have one-on-one conversations. Canvassing a building to get someone to sign a petition is great, but how do you know what to put in that petition? How do you know what the problems are? you talk to your neighbors, and it gets easier. And I have so many friends in the building now. Like, most of my closest friends are my neighbors. And it's because we did that initial push. And I think part of the problem that we still have is getting people to commit to doing that and then following up on that. Like, they're like, oh, we don't have an issue to campaign about right now. It's like, we will once we knock on doors. We have to ask people what their issues are. We're here to serve them. You can't do that if you're not talking to them. So what really helped me, I was super nervous to start knocking on my neighbors' doors. I actually made the person that knocked on my door do about an hour and a half of role play with me. And I was like, okay, now be mean. Like, pretend you don't want to see me. Like, say your dog just died. Like, throw whatever you can at me, because you don't know what's gonna happen.
That's true.
And just prepare yourself as much as you can. And then once you do that, you read the literature, look at other buildings that have successful tenants associations, find people and ask them questions about what worked for them. And if you don't know the answer to your question, be like, that's great, let's look into that together. I haven't encountered that situation. Just get out there, talk to your neighbors, and the easiest way to do that is to prepare yourself. Think of all the questions that you can think of that someone might ask you, and then educate yourself on it. And there are going to be things that you don't know, but you're not alone. And you find out that you're not alone by knocking on those doors. And a lot of people think like, oh, it's futile. Like, the management doesn't care about me. Like, they're not going to fix my problem. If we all ask together, we can be very loud. We can get them to do a lot of things. That's it for me.
As far as organizing in our buildings, 2 buildings are concerned, we've done extensive door knocking. We have a number of people that do answer the doors, they'll talk to us. The follow through is, up until the last meeting, was, I think, good. The challenge now is to keep them focused and on track. And for some reason, I'm thinking of Thomas Paine and the Crisis Papers, and how those folks back in the 1700s had the gumption and the willingness to band together. We're dealing with a lot of issues in this country right now, and we're talking about organizing in our buildings. You've got AI coming online. It's going to squeeze people. You have the financial situation, which is going to impact people, and how you get them to follow through is, I guess, a challenge. And we'll see how it goes. We've got a good cadre of people in our building that are organizers. So I'll let go with that right now.
Awesome. Thank you all. I think for my last question, I think before I just see if there are any audience questions, I'll make it either or. Choose your own adventure. Either if there's a recent, or like in your time organizing, if there's been sort of like a moment that you're really proud of, like a win that you've had, no matter how big or small, or just looking ahead in your organizing, what do you all think is like next? It can be in the building, in your building, citywide, whatever. So if either of these questions speak to you, or both, feel free.
Okay, I can go first this time. I like both of those adventures, so I think I will try to be brief, but I will try to touch on both. So our building going through the TOPA process, we got a lot of big wins there. we got them to commit, the new ownership to commit to like $60,000 towards accessibility improvements. We got improvements to the gym, we got bike storage, we got like a cap on rent increases for the people that were there during the transition up until 2024, so it could only go up by a certain percentage. We got them to keep on some of the concierge staff that we liked. So there were a lot of wins there, and the reason that I kind of want to touch on both questions is I think that it's important to celebrate those wins and to be vocal about those wins and remind people of what we've been able to accomplish in the past, because that does get them excited about the future and what we can still accomplish. Like, we're not going through TOPA, but we meet with management, our board meets with management quarterly. That's something that we had them agree to. The last one was 2 days ago, where like we're talking to the neighbors, these are what's happening. Like, can you commit to fixing it? And they're gonna have an answer to us next week about getting the outside of the building power washed, some improvements. There's been some like lighting issues, there's been some air conditioning issues, there's been some roach issues. They say it's a luxury building, but I have roaches. I keep it pretty clean.
Yeah.
It's not just me, but there's always like a stigma to that. And you have to talk to your neighbors, and you have to look at what you've been able to accomplish, and that will get you fired up about what you can accomplish. And as far as like what's next, yeah, we're still fighting. We still have problems. I can't tell you what's next. Everything. We're gonna fix everything. And we know that we can, and we can do it because we're doing it together. And then also, our board is really trying to focus on being an example and being available to talk to other buildings and helping with like a citywide TOPA campaign that's happening right now to try to stop them from taking away some of those TOPA rights, and educating our tenants so that they can go out and educate others, because we have been successful. We're going to continue to be successful, and we need to help other people to do that. So I think that's where our current focus is. And I'm very excited about it.
As far as some of the successes that we've had, we had a demand letter that went out in March of this year. The management, the person that's in charge of our respondents at Don Stokes for Ross Management, they would only communicate with us in writing. They would not agree to a meeting. We ended up going to their headquarters in Bethesda. We got into the office. We asked for audience. It just so happens Don Stokes appeared. He was going into a meeting room with a number of other people. He saw us and went back the other way. We stayed there for close to half an hour when we were asked to leave. There were 5 of us on that occasion at their headquarters building. We ended up leaving after we were asked to vacate the building. Subsequent to that, we went down to Caffert's building on K Street. They would not meet. They were on a retreat that week. A couple of weeks later, another group went down, and they were there. They would not meet, and they would not accept the letter. There's been some movement. Garden that was asked for a year ago, they've went to some considerable expense in providing an area along with really substantial park benches and seating and an area to grow vegetables and fruits. And it's a problem with packages coming in after normal business hours, and then they come up missing. They've offered to provide a room with a fob that residents would access that room. That's still in the offing. Some of our core issues that have to do with things like heat in the wintertime. There'll be days in a row when there'll be no heat. And this is not a slum type building at all, but it makes you wonder. Then there'll be days when some units are boiling hot. That still remains to be dealt with. There are other issues. There are folks in our building, the Hispanics, by and large, are being singled out to be removed. That's something that is a problem, an issue that is being dealt with. So it's a mixed bag at this point, and we have to stay organized and together and motivated so that we can get the changes that are needed. And it can happen. It takes commitment, and people have to set aside time and prioritize the sort of work that we're doing. Or they eventually, the majority group, is going to be pushed to the walls as well.
Okay, I'm gonna try not to get too excited because I feel like I have a lot of wins that I'm really excited about all the time. So, but there's levels, you know, so I feel like I'm still really excited about how we won state DC money. Like, what the heck? I mean, seriously, that was tenants, okay? Wow. Yes. So, state DC was, it was a government program that allowed for tenants to get their rent arrears paid to the landlord. So, for example, I lost my job in 2020, yay! And then I couldn't pay my rent. I don't be like me. I still paid my rent even though I didn't have a job. Like, what was I thinking? And I was like, wait a minute, I'm a tenant organizer. Like, why am I not talking to my neighbors? So I started talking to my neighbors, organizing on other buildings, and if you missed it during COVID, you know, there were a huge number of buildings that went on rent strike, and we went to the mayor's house, and wow, she loves that, it was great. And anyway, so we won state DC money, which allowed tenants to stay in their homes, like me. So I successfully, I got like a year's worth of rent paid, thank goodness, because I definitely would have had to move. So that's like such a big win. I'm still on pride in that way. Like that was 4 years ago, but whatever. And then a more recent win, big issue for a lot of buildings, locks on doors. What is it with landlords not getting regular locks that work? I don't know. But our tenant association was like, okay, you need to replace these locks that keep on breaking because they're really flimsy and ridiculous. And how much are we spending on these? $5? And they replaced it. And they're like, thank you, that's great, because it's an exterior door and we don't want people just walking into our building. And then it broke again. And then that happened like 5 more times. And we were like, okay, we're having a meeting with you, with the tenant association, with management, and you're gonna have to buy a lock that we're gonna look up. We're looking up a lock, and you're gonna install this lock because it's actually a real lock. So that was a win, you know, locks on doors, pretty good. But also, like, just every time I meet a new person, I honestly feel like it's a win. I know I'm so corny, I'm sorry. But, like, every time I knock on the door, and, you know, I'm just a random person. I'm not people's neighbors most of the time, so I'm just knocking on people's doors saying, hi, I'm a tenant organizer, I'm doing outreach, and there's a lot of issues in this building, and people are coming together. I want to know what issues you're facing in this building and how we can work together. And just like people pouring out all their issues and how we can work together and we do believe in collective action, it just warms my heart every single time. And it is really hard to get rejected sometimes, you know, but there was just a tenant that I had knocked on her door last year. And they answered, and it was like, yeah, okay, that sounds nice, whatever. But never really followed up with me when I was trying to get back in contact. And then another tenant who is like a good friend of mine now, she got in contact with that tenant, and now we're like all good friends. It's so great, you know? But all she needed was another tenant to talk to her and bring her in. And it's just so great. Like, it's such a good feeling to build community. And especially when to like the future question, like, we need a strong tenant lobby, you know? I hate to call it that, but like, the landlord lobby is way too powerful, and we have all these numbers. I mean, it's ridiculous. So we need to get ourselves together when we're working on it. And I'm really excited for the prospect of a tenant union that will bring folks from all over the city in together to advocate for just citywide changes, you know, to stop slumlordism, landlord absenteeism, you know, that kind of stuff. And people are really excited about it, at least when I'm talking to tenants, so that's really exciting for me. So, you know, it always makes me happy. Feels like a win.
Awesome, thank you all. That's a lot to look forward to, it's awesome. So we have about 8 minutes left, so I think that's time for maybe one question. If folks have any questions, you raise, okay, awesome, I'll just run up the mic.
Thank you so much all for being here. My name's Ryan, I use she, her pronouns. I'm at 1500 Massachusetts Avenue, which is about 500 units. We didn't have AC for 10 days in May since our chiller has been going on and off. They say it's working, but it's not keeping up with the high temperatures. We've been in touch with the Department of Buildings, the Office of the Tenant Advocate. We've sent a demand letter to the landlord. We're restarting our tenants association. And basically the landlord was like, no, we aren't going to give rent concessions to everyone, only the people who emailed us at the specific time when we never told anyone to email us. So kind of question, where do we go from here? We have a meeting on Thursday. I feel like we're trying to like explore our legal options, but like people are talking about like leaving negative Google reviews, like other things we can be doing to add pressure and make sure that our tenants are being treated equitably and staying cool in their apartments.
Thank you. Do any of you wanna?
Okay, this is a really big issue also at, well, a lot of buildings, but since I was talking about St. Elizabeth's as well, because the AC will just be on and the thermostat says like 78 degrees. Like, what the heck? So clearly it's not working. Folks are starting to withhold rent, which is also a great win. I love getting calls where people are like, I sent my notice of withholding rent and they came to my apartment right away, and wow, they just like are so nice now. But really, I think we decided at St. Elizabeth's to initiate a rent strike because we had already gone through the proper channels. You know, we had a meeting with the landlord, and the landlord's a nonprofit, so they're like, oh, we're nice, we have good values, you know, and that kind of stuff. And so we know that they're gonna be really offended if we start like talking some nonsense, you know, publicly about them, and start publicizing that this is happening, which we're just starting now to publicize, and that going on rent strike is the right thing to do in this case because of the price of utilities is so, or the cost for tenants is so high that it's just crazy. Like, people are seriously like, I mean, going into debt because of utility bills. It's just like stupid. But I feel like I'm curious who your landlord is or who the management is.
Equity.
Oh, it's Equity. Okay. So yeah, okay. So Equity is like huge, right? I feel like for a place like St. Elizabeth, the Anacostia Economic Development Corporation, long name, is who owns the building, and they're a small nonprofit in DC. So we know where they are. We can just go up to their office and kind of like humiliate them. But for Equity, you know, it's a huge thing. I would be interested in, there's a lot of Equity buildings, you know, like contacting them, seeing what's happening there, connecting with other tenants, and doing a bigger scale push on equity to like really humiliate them. Like, what are you guys doing? And I mean, they definitely have the money to fix it. So getting that kind of information, but really more people power. I know that's like not, you know, the thing that everyone wants to hear, but that's the challenge, you know, that we're talking about. Like having the more people and pushing the right pressure points is like gonna be really crucial. So I'd be interested in talking to you.
Yeah, and I will also say, just because I think this is a darkly funny anecdote, Marbury Plaza, which is the building where I organize with, it's a big building in Anacostia, been on rent strike for basically 3 years protesting terrible living conditions. Their AC went out 2 summers ago, I think, and the city's answer was to put out, or the management's answer was to get 2 buses, like 2 city buses that were air conditioned to sit outside the building for people to go and sit in when they got too hot. And this was like during a heat wave when like people were sleeping like on their like balconies because it was so hot. Like kids were going to like other family members' homes because they just like couldn't stay in. And the management's answer was to put like these city buses out. So it just like emphasizes the need of, you know, like there are a lot of different processes that you can go through to try to like get like a lot of different agencies you can try to talk to, but that can take a lot of time. And if it is 100 degrees right now, like the most I think effective thing that you can do is really get your neighbors organized, talk to them, and then like do something that'll make the landlord listen, like withhold your rent. Because if they're not holding their end of the contract up, you shouldn't have to either. And so we're about on time because there's another panel that's ready to come in. But I just want to say sort of, we alluded to this a little bit. We are really trying to build up, we've done a lot of organizing in different individual buildings in the city. I've tried to build connections across different buildings. But we are really trying to build up more of a citywide movement, especially as we talked about, the landlord lobby has been trying to gut our right to TOPA, the right to that Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which gives tenants power and a say in what happens to their homes if there's a sale of the building. We were able to organize and kind of stop the initial attempt to get it, but we know that they're still trying to chip away at it. And so we're trying to organize tenants across the city in multifamily buildings and just, you know, renters in general. I'm a renter in like a single condo unit, so I unfortunately don't have any other neighbors of the same landlord to organize. But we want to not just preserve TOPA, but we want to strengthen it. We want the city to fund it so tenants really do like have the financial assistance to buy their building if they want to, and to expand it so that way tenants who live in single family homes or who rent from single family homes or from single units also have that opportunity as well. So if you're interested in organizing your building or in getting involved in that citywide movement, please come, feel free to talk to one of us after, and you can also email tenants, TENANTS @ndcdsa.org, and someone can help you talk through how to organize your building or get you more involved in the larger movement. But thank you all for coming, and thank you all. Your experiences are just, it's really incredible to hear just like the way that you've been able to like get real wins, whether it's conditions fixes, you know, rent concessions. It's been awesome, and I'm very happy to organize with you all. Thank you.